Hello everyone, my name is Isis Fuentes and my Mythbuster lab question was, does fertilizer really affect plant growth? And you might be saying, Isis, that's a silly question. Of course you need fertilizer for plant growth. But this experiment I conducted might change your mind. For this experiment, you will need seeds of your choice. I chose grass seeds. I got some cute ass pots from Target and these were in a kit. I believe they were like $2 and they already came with grass seeds. And depending on how many control groups and how many experimental groups you will be using, that's how many pots you will need. So I had 2 experimental groups and 1 control group. One was labeled no fertilizer, fertilizer, and extra fertilizer. For that, you will need a Sharpie or generic brand is okay too if you're poor like me. This is totally optional, but I had a bunch of plastic bottles laying around. So I cut this Dr. Pepper bottle in half, just like this. And I had a couple of these and I just put them on top of my little pot like that after I planted my seeds. And I just sprayed them twice a day and I covered them for the first couple days. And this just creates a humid environment inside of the little plastic. You will also need some soil. Now this is totally up to you. I just used regular soil that I picked up at Target. And of course, you will need your fertilizer of choice. I grabbed this one. I know it says vegetable and tomato, but this had the best reviews on Amazon. And if you're like me, you will need a snack because you are not you when you're hungry. Some Takis. But make sure to wash your hands because you don't want to be eating fertilizer. Gathered all of this stuff and then I was put to work. Now, if you're like me, you're ditzy, these little guys were my plan B. 3 little strawberry containers, all organic strawberries. And what I did was I cut the skin off of the strawberries so I would be able to grow them. And
instead, I grew mold.
The objective of this project was to examine how fertilizer will affect our plant growth, and the way that we will be doing that is we will be putting our plant seeds or our grass seeds inside of these little pots. Little guys are pretty tiny, so I only put about 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon of soil in each of them. And what I did was I prepared my soil and I put nothing in the no fertilizer one. And then in the fertilizer one, I put a tablespoon of fertilizer and I mixed it in there. So make sure that you mix it real good with the soil. And then on my extra fertilizer pot, I put 2.5 tablespoons of fertilizer. So in the first day, I did not measure anything. I just sprayed it once in the morning and then once before I went to bed. And the next day I started getting a little bit of sprouts. And that's when I started measuring my grass. It actually grew pretty quickly, and I have to say that I think the reason it grew very quickly was because of this. It really traps like all the water in there, and it creates a very humid environment inside of this little pot in order for it to kind of speed up the process. Put these little pots in front of my windowsill, and there's a bunch of sunlight that comes in through my window, so that was a perfect place. I put them all in the same place, sprayed them once in the morning, and sprayed them before I went to bed. So 2 sprays a day, and then I collected my data with measurements with a measure tape. And the way that I measured it was in centimeters. It's important to note that this fertilizer does claim to have a combination of healthy bacteria that includes some fungi and some archaea. This blend of microorganisms is claimed to improve the soil quality and to promote plant growth. I also whispered some sweet nothings to them. I think that's kind of what helped it grow a little bit. And bam, before I knew it, grass was starting to grow. Now, after the 4 days, I concluded that the fertilizer definitely affects the plant growth of this grass, and we can clearly see it from all 3 pots. Just looking at day 1, it looks like my owl was the one that was growing the fastest. And then as we speed up the process a little bit, the fox definitely overcame all of the other pots. Now, there was nothing special put into these pots. It was just soil, fertilizer, and water. I did not give any of these extra treatments or extra water. I made sure to treat them all the same. I came across an article explaining to me what over-fertilization is. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely didn't know that this was a thing before I started my experiment. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I will do my best to explain this. And to my knowledge, excess fertilizer will cause there to be a high salt concentration in the soil. This is very dangerous because the microorganisms that are inside of the fertilizer or claimed to be inside of the fertilizer will eventually die off and won't be present. This will lead to very, very rapid plant growth. And although that's what we want, grow very, very fast. but the structure and the network of the roots of those plants will be very, very brittle, and they won't be what you really want for a mass production of crops. Poor root structure can also lead to a reduction in the growth, so that is definitely not what we want. Having too much fertilizer in the soil can also lead to evaporation of the water that's being put into the plants. There's really no use in watering your plants if it's not going to be taking in any of the water. Now, I believe what I did was I over-fertilized this last pot, and that is why it stunted in growth a little bit. It definitely was lower than the second pot that I had with just the regular fertilizer, and the grass growth on the second with just 1 tablespoon of fertilizer grew very, very fast, and it stayed pretty much green the whole time. I believe the second day after this experiment ended, I was still watering these plants, but the last pot that had extra fertilizer began to dry up and kind of brown at the top. So to me, that led me to believe that I had over-fertilized this little pot. It's important to know what's inside of fertilizer as well. So the fertilizer that I chose has nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, which can be found in pretty much universal fertilizers all around the world. Those are the 3 main components that fertilizer is made out of. Now, nitrogen promotes plant growth, and it makes it super awesome because it's water soluble and it's the perfect nutrient for our grass. Potassium helps water absorption in plants, and phosphorus helps the process of photosynthesis by helping plants expel excess water. Now, the source of phosphorus in this specific fertilizer is bone meal. It's good to know what kind of nutrients are in your fertilizer so you're familiar with the process that's going on while you're growing your seeds. That there's fungi that are found in the fertilizer that will expand their roots and attach itself to the actual system of the plant that you're growing. So these 2 networks combine together to create a sound structure, which helps take up nutrients and water better from the soil. Although the difference in growth rates between my last 2 pots was not that big of a deal or that big of a difference, I do think that I over-fertilized the last pot, and that is why it was shorter than the one that just had regular fertilizer. This experiment showed to me that plants need a proper soil to fertilizer ratio in order to promote a rapid and healthy growth